According to reports from official Chinese media, China's Ryukyu Studies academic project has been officially approved by the state and included in a national-level support program. What is the significance of establishing this new discipline of Ryukyu Studies? Why is it worthy of national-level support? Because this is intended to prepare public opinion for China's next strategic direction. Recently, Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi has repeatedly provoked China, issuing the first military threat against China since World War II. Militarism is visibly resurging inside Japan, and the likelihood of external aggression has grown significantly. Takaichi still refuses to retract her remarks, which shows she does not see any problem with threatening China militarily. Therefore, China must respond, otherwise this becomes the new status quo between the two countries. If Japan dares to fire the first shot, Japan will definitely be struck with overwhelming force. But based on the current situation, Japan absolutely does not dare to start the conflict, because the United States has clearly stated it does not support Takaichi's remarks. If the US does not tie itself to Japan's war chariot, then as long as Japan retains even a trace of rationality, it will not have the courage to charge ahead on its own. The probability that Japan completely loses all rationality is low. But even if Japan remains somewhat rational and does not escalate further, this matter cannot simply be brushed aside just because Japan did not initiate a conflict. If Japan does not fire the first shot, China will not start a war. But that does not mean China cannot begin slicing the salami. On November 15th, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian reiterated the Potsdam Proclamation, explicitly stating that Japan's territory is limited to the 4 islands of Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu, and Hokkaido. The implication is clear. According to the most important legal foundation of the post-World War II global order, the Potsdam Proclamation, China can recognize Japan's sovereignty over those 4 islands. And as long as Japan does not fire the first shot, China will not take military action. But conversely, everything outside those 4 islands does not belong to Japan whether Japan fires the first shot or not. The first place to be sliced is the Diaoyu Islands, followed by the plan to restore the Ryukyu Kingdom. The Ryukyu Islands hold critical strategic importance, extraordinary and unmistakable. A glance at the map shows their significance immediately. The old Ryukyu Kingdom consisted mainly of 3 island groups. The Okinawa Islands centered on Okinawa Island, the Amami Islands centered on Amami-shima, and the Sakishima Islands centered on the Yama and Miyako groups. Lying outside China's Diaoyu Islands, see their location. They lie directly between Taiwan and Japan, forming a natural shield for China's Fujian-Zhejiang coastline. Tokara Island, at the northern end of the Ryukyus, is only 350 kilometers from mainland Japan. Yonaguni Island, the westernmost point, is just 110 kilometers from Taiwan. Hataruma Island is only 380 kilometers from China's Fujianindi coastline. The U.S. military base on Okinawa is 640 kilometers from Fuzhou and 800 kilometers from Shanghai, well within strike range, functioning as an unsinkable supercarrier. The largest USA Air Force base in East Asia is located on Okinawa, equipped with 2 enormous 3,700-meter runways and a dedicated ammunition depot covering 7.1 square kilometers. Let's zoom in. Combining these facts, it becomes obvious why who the Ryukyu Islands belong to is a crucial question. Takaichi keeps shouting, if Taiwan has an incident, Japan has an incident. If the Ryukyus remain under US-Japanese control, Japan indeed has the capability to intervene. The islands form a natural stepping stone for projecting force. But if the Ryukyus do not remain in US-Japan hands, then Japan does not need to worry about Taiwan's problem. It must first worry about whether Japan itself has a problem. Beyond strategy, there is the legal basis. Under the Potsdam proclamation the cornerstone of the modern international order. The Ryukyu Islands do not belong to Japan, nor to the United States, and no country possesses sovereignty over them. From a historical perspective, the Ryukyu Islands have always belonged to the Ryukyu Kingdom, and the Ryukyu Kingdom was historically a vassal state of China. Finally, there is the matter of public sentiment. Local residents of the Ryukyu Islands have always maintained a foundation of support for restoring the Ryukyu Kingdom. The current governor of Okinawa Prefecture, Denny Tamaki, elected by the local population, once visited China to pay respects at the Ryukyu National Cemetery. When the Ryukyu Kingdom was destroyed in 1872, envoys were sent to China for help. Through the Ryukyu Hall, the ancient guest house for tributary states, they submitted bloody petitions to the Governor-General of Fujian and Zhejiang, the Songli Yamen, and even the Emperor, pleading for military intervention to restore the kingdom. But the late Qing government was too weak to intervene overseas and could only negotiate with Japan. In 1880, Qing-Japanese negotiations proposed partitioning the Ryukyu Islands and restoring a smaller central Ryukyu kingdom. The Qing government was ready to sign, preserving part of the kingdom's existence though reduced to one-third of its original size. The Ryukyuan envoy Lin Shigong committed suicide in front of the Zongli Yamen in Beijing, leaving a letter begging the Qing court to reject the treaty. His death shocked the entire Qing bureaucracy, and the court unanimously decided to refuse to sign. With neither Qing approval nor the signature of the Ryukyuan monarch, Japan's occupation of the Ryukyu Islands was an illegitimate act of aggression. Lin Shigong gave his life to preserve the full legal basis for restoring the Ryukyu Kingdom. He was buried in China, where a Ryukyu National Cemetery was established in his honor. This cemetery is certainly not a place Japan wants Governor Denny Tamaki to visit, because its existence is ironclad evidence of Japan's illegal annexation of the Ryukyu Kingdom. Paying respects there equates to supporting Ryukyuan restoration. Tamaki did so because it reflects the will of the local population. Even after more than a century of Japanese rule and assimilation, by 2025, an astonishing 41% of Ryukyu residents identified as Ryukyuan rather than Japanese, rejecting Japanese rule. Their support for restoration is not nostalgia, it is a reaction to Japan's deeply discriminatory rule. Since annexation, Ryukyuans have been treated as lower-class people within the Japanese system. Tokyo imposed harsh governance, and resentment has never stopped. During the 1945 Battle of Okinawa, Japan never treated Ryukyuans as human. If mass sacrifice was expected for mainland Japan, why would Ryukyuans be exempt? Before the battle, Okinawa had 450,000 people. 150,000 were forced into labor-building defenses. More than 50,000 were forcibly conscripted to die honorably. All food and supplies were requisitioned for the Japanese army. After the war, only 110,000 residents remained. 360,000 people vanished. Other islands suffered heavy losses for the same reason. Japan forced every island to fight to the last. If the Ryukyu Kingdom still existed, casualties would never have been so catastrophic. But as long as the Ryukyus belong to Japan, any future war will again demand that Ryukyuans sacrifice everything to protect mainland Japan. Anyone living there would think this through. This is why even after 100+ years of occupation, with Japan having relocated 9 times the number of mainland Japanese settlers to dilute the local population, Ryukyu restoration sentiment remains strong. Regardless of origin, once someone lives in the Ryukyus, they become Ryukyuan and they learn their history. They see how Japan refused to evacuate civilians and use their lives as expendable resources. It chills anyone's heart. Even people who moved from mainland Japan to live in the Ryukyus gradually become supporters of restoration, out of fear of being sacrificed again. Japan cannot eliminate this sentiment, no matter how it manipulates population or appointments. The core reason is simple. Japan did not treat Ryukyuans as human in World War II, and therefore anyone who lives there fears Japan's rule. Where there is public sentiment, political leaders will emerge. Many politicians are interested in Ryukyuan restoration not because they long for the old kingdom, but because being leader of a nation is far more attractive than being a provincial governor. Supporting Ryukyuan restoration aligns with international law, the Potsdam Proclamation, historical tradition, and local public opinion. Founding a local proxy to promote restoration would be extremely easy. Western countries have supported exiled governments and restoration movements countless times. China doing the same once, especially for a kingdom that repeatedly pleaded for Chinese help, is perfectly legitimate. Given the Ryukyu's immense strategic importance and strong legal and popular foundations, why is the Diao Islands issue still prioritized ahead of Ryukyu restoration? Because the Diao Islands are inside, while the Ryukyus are outside. Maps make this obvious. In international politics, power and actual control matter. China cannot support Ryukyuan restoration until it firmly controls the Diao Islands. This is why Japan is hypersensitive about the Diaois once China gains full control. The entire Ryukyu chain becomes unstable. Legally, China's position on the Ryukyus is responding to a request for restoration. On the Diao Islands, it is a direct sovereign claim. Under the Potsdam Proclamation, Japan's sovereignty is limited to 4 islands. Everything outside is not Japan's, so Japan cannot possibly claim sovereignty over the Diao Islands. If the world acknowledges the proclamation, Japan has no legal basis. If the world denies it, the post-war order collapses and World War III begins. And the Diao Islands certainly would not belong to Japan under that scenario. So even if Takaichi stops her provocations, China will still proceed with salami slicing the Diaois. The islands must eventually come under full Chinese control, just as Philippine provocations have only accelerated China's expansion of actual control in the South China Sea. Once China fully controls the Diao Islands, the next step is Ryukyu restoration. China does not need to annex the Ryukyus, only to remove US-Japanese military presence and support a pro-China Ryukyuan government. Japan does not control the Diao Islands, but it does control the Ryukyus, and the islands hold far greater strategic value, hosting the largest US military base in East Asia. Thus, the challenge is far greater than seizing the Diaois. China must first secure the Diaois, then address the Ryukyus. But preparation must begin early, such as establishing Ryukyu Studies and strengthening cultural and public opinion groundwork. These efforts require only words, but with time they will bear fruit. In 1911, on the eve of the Qing dynasty's collapse 39 years after the destruction of the Ryukyu kingdom, Japan supported scholar Iha Fire in creating Ryukyuan studies to erase China's influence. In 2025, China supports scholars in establishing Ryukyu studies to restore China's influence. 114 years have passed, the world has changed beyond recognition.